Grace and peace, family. I hope everybody is feeling blessed today. All right, so this episode is not really, I feel like, a podcast episode, but maybe it isn't. It is. I don't get it. But either way, I know it is a topic that needs to be discussed because so many people have no understanding of how to do this properly. Now, the topic at hand is being alone. This is something I feel most people on this planet has a hard time with. They don't know how to be alone. This is why during the pandemic, when a lot of people were forced to be indoors and away from people that they normally would socialize with, and all they had was a cell phone, a lot of people really got into themselves. Depression was on an all-time high. And for me, it wasn't actually. I actually enjoyed the pandemic very much. I wish I could have been more alone, surprisingly. But either way, I didn't have to socialize with a lot of people, and it made me so comfortable. Now, of course, someone who would say that would definitely be an empath. I am an empath. On top of that, I'm a super empath. Being alone is my superpower. I love it. Absolutely love it. Did I always love it? I want to say I didn't. I want to say I grew to love being alone. And it could have been because I've always felt slightly alone. Like no one understood me personally. So since they didn't understand me, being alone became the thing. Now, when I tap that on also with my need to maintain my sanity from youth all the way into adulthood, being alone was the only thing that helped me maintain that. Because anytime I wasn't, that was the only time I experienced discomfort within my vessel. Now I'm going to get into what drove me to start this podcast episode specifically. I was sitting with myself and I was channeling a bit. So in my stillness, I like to channel energy that I feel around me personally. And I heard what sounded like a conversation. It could either have been that or someone's internal thoughts. And what was said was, notice how she's always alone. No one must want to be around her. And when I heard it, I chuckled a bit because there are over 8.3 billion people on this planet. Again, I give you over 8.3 because remember, we're not accurate. There are people they don't know that are not documented, but they're here. For me to not have anyone who would want to willingly be in my presence would be wild. Literally wild. So that statement from the energy, I already knew was one of those statements you say when you want to feel comfortable about how you view a person. One of those, I need to at least feel like there's no strength in the fact that this person operates from that place. So that's what the source of my chuckle really was. And as I decided, you know what, I'm going to hone in on this energy real quick because I wanted to see if I could give more understanding besides recognizing that this was a coping mechanism of someone else who needed to have validation for themselves because they, needed to understand how I operate, and yet they did not do a good job of it at all. But I wanted to really elaborate, not just for myself, for each and every person who has put into practice being alone on purpose. Because yes, me being alone is very much purposeful. Now, the first thing to know, right, is that we are born into families. Even those who are born into families and maybe even are orphaned, have no family, get adopted, or at least meet people in their lives, you develop a family. You develop people you can either rely on, that you can go to, that you know regularly, or some sort of closeness has been built. To choose to be alone when that is always a possibility would mean that you have a particular standard for the company that you keep. And when I say for the company that you keep, I don't mean it as if it is an expectation of those, because it is the release of expectation that allows you to be alone. It's recognizing that nobody is required to do or be anything for you, and maybe even that they haven't anyway. And you've made your peace with that factor. On top of the peace made with not giving anyone an expectation, you've released yourself from the need to have those around who don't choose to be in purity. Now, we're going to go on to this part of this. My choice to be alone. It stems from two things. First, we're going to go into the background. I was not an orphan. I was born into a family, like most people. And I grew up with them, had siblings, all of that, the whole 9 yards. And yes, I socialized with none of them. And I'm going to give you the reason. Just like how I said a second ago about not having expectations on people. And yet, each and every one of these people who were placed in my life had an expectation of me. I was expected to fit a certain dynamic. I needed to be useful. I needed to play small. And I needed to be pliable. Now, as a child, that's easy to do, especially when you are groomed that is your role. And until you learn otherwise, you will play that role, especially when you link it to important factors like love, like care, support. And what I mean by that is having to link the fact that if you don't produce some sort of variable that makes you needed or even has a purpose to be in that company, you are then disposable. And it doesn't have to be to the magnitude of throwing you physically away. It could be emotionally. And in my case, it was very much emotional. But in some ways, it trickled down into physical as well, where the only way I could receive any sort of connection from those where it should have been free, I needed to play a role that made me useful or usable. Now, young, I didn't know this. I really didn't know this. I had no idea. I thought that this was just how life is supposed to be, at least how my life was supposed to be. And that's what a lot of people fall into the trap of, believing that their life is supposed to be a particular way because it was always that way. So coming out of that type of grooming to have your worthiness tied to what you could provide for others and every single person around you, it puts you in the headspace of thinking that that's the way life is supposed to be. Now, with all of that, I attempted to run away from that feeling of having my worthiness tied to what I produced and jumped into a marriage very early. But what I didn't know was that this type of grooming literally runs you into the hands of a narcissistic, relationships. It just naturally does it. Now, when it comes to narcissistic relationships, people who have these traits, I am in no way judging them, because honestly, we all have a bit of narcissistic traits within us. It's just a part of the live ego. Everyone has an ego. The ego doesn't die, it doesn't disappear. You learn how to integrate your ego, to understand it so that it doesn't flare up and think it has to take control. So, there are levels to narcissism. But what I will say is, when you are an empath and you are very soft with your emotions and soft with the way that you handle people, it is easy for someone who has an ego that is not checked and very ingrained in a narcissism to now look at you as prey. And they know exactly what to say, because it's the opposite of everything the ones who made you feel unwanted say to you anyway. So you kind of get lured into the glamour of finally having freedom. And in that whole glamour, that falsified dream of I'm free, you have no idea that you've walked into a new prison. And this one doesn't have bars. This one you weren't born into. You walked into this one willingly. This does a whole bunch of new damage to you mentally, because now you're thinking, well, I committed to this prison, so at least it's a choice, which is not an option. And you also come to terms with the fact that you feel like you have some sort of control and say-so, since it was a choice. And no. These are lies we tell to ourselves so that it doesn't feel as difficult looking at the truth. But when you finally look at the truth, you realize, certainly not. You made a mistake. But or did you? Because a lot of what we go through is very much necessary. I will say I went through a lot in the marriage under guidelines I definitely should have never been under. But I could have not been in the marriage and still needed to learn every single lesson I learned while in the marriage, except for with more names attached to it, which I see a lot of people do anyway. The things I went through under the hands of one person who had narcissistic traits, I see that the same ones who would judge, oh, I couldn't stay for any of that, they literally go through the same scenarios, the same learning curve, except for they have so many other names attached to it. So where John was only physically abusive, or Terrence was only emotional abusive, mine was named Keith. So everything that I went through, I just had one name attached, and I wouldn't have had it any other way, because it does breed bitterness. I will say, when you choose to walk into several different prisons that all have different lessons, and you still end up walking out of each one of those prisons battered and bruised, it can breed a heavy load of bitterness. And you want to assign that bitterness to the ones who assigned your pain, but really, it was you. I feel it was way easier for me to come to terms with the fact that I made this choice. I never projected onto it that this was made for me. No, I chose to be where I was. I recognized that I could have walked out of it several times. Several. Not once, not twice, several. Every day I woke up, I had a choice. So the bitterness never set in, because I wasn't a part of who I was anyway. The sadness of feeling like this happened to me over and over, that never set in, because yes, it was the same person who could not get it right. But I wasn't choosing to completely run from my lesson into a whole new one. Now I'm going to go back to the whole acceptance of alone. When I finally walked out of my secondary prison, I had to really sit with myself and recognize how easily I could walk into another one. Because I didn't walk away whole. It wasn't as if I was healing while in the setting, because you cannot do that. You must remove yourself from the predator in order for your nervous system to calm down again. So I had to be alone in order to really reflect. And it was in the reflection of leaving the secondary prison that I could finally see the first prison for what it was. And that's what really assisted with my movement forward in my healing. I recognized how much of my life I had to be everything but me. How many years I lived as a title. I was sister, I was daughter, I was wife, I was friend, I was family, I was even mom, and mom was probably the only title that didn't cause injury. So that was where I threw myself into. That was my safe haven, because I couldn't learn myself in that process because I had the definition of who I was given to me. But when it came to being mom, I had so much value in that role. And it was that kept me in the secondary prison longer than I should have been, because I had 2 children in the marriage. But it was worth me sitting and staying put for a while, because it gave me a chance to pour into them when I wasn't ready to pour into myself. Now, the choice to be alone came out of that as well, because I had one idea that I had built so many bricks on top of and had to tear it all down. This was the idea that a lot of my childhood issues stem from the fact that I had to live in a single parent household. And so much weight was placed on my mother to be a mom. And for a long time, I felt like that was the reason why life was so hard, because she had too much to juggle and not enough assistance. And I believe this was something that was taught to me to think that her discomfort came from that. So when it came to me staying in my secondary prison, I figured I'm saving them from the pain that would be caused of living in a single parent household. Now, walking out, that whole dynamic shattered for me, because I realized it was built on a lie. My hardships with my single parent household didn't stem from the fact that there was no masculine figure in the household. It stemmed from the fact that my mom wasn't good at juggling, being a single mother. Now, she provided, and I was so grateful that she did, because again, I did make it into adulthood. A lot of kids ain't doing that these days. We'll talk about it in another episode. But I did make it, right? I realized walking out of the secondary prison that in my case, that was very different. The comfort my girls needed came from me needing to be a single mother for them. That was an eye-opener to recognize that they flourished under just having a mother versus having a father who was emotionally tormenting their mother, and that was affecting them. This was also a conversation I had with my oldest child when she maybe was about 15, where she asked me why I was still here, and I told her it was because they deserve to have everything that we built together. They deserve to be able to live comfortable and not have to struggle the things that I had to do when I was younger. And her rebuttal was, but we're watching you be unhappy. You're also teaching us that our happiness, your children's happiness, come at the cost of your own. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. As a matter of fact, it felt like all those bricks I built on top of that idea that single parent households is what causes problems with the children emotionally. She put them all in the bag and hit me with that bag. I hit with a lot of bricks that day. But it helped me walk out the prison. Being able to have that conversation with a child who could say that her strength came from her mother. And in turn, she gave me the gift of the strength I needed to finish off the job. So definitely gratitude. But now I walk into the alone factor. We're going to talk about this real quick because I feel like if you've ever had to walk away from everyone, everything in your life, you understand this whole I'd rather be alone factor. I really had to look at it as when you are playing, I think the game is blackjack or 21. It's a casino game where they deal you your cards, and if your cards are a dud, you literally could trade them in and get a whole new set of cards. That's what I felt like I needed to do. I was holding on to people who didn't value me and proved it every single day of my life. Not theirs, my life, they proved it. Every time I was around, they proved I had no value. They proved that it didn't matter how much I bent over backwards, how much I gave, it would never be enough. It didn't matter how many years I put in doing so, it would never be enough. But what could be enough is me. You see, I was content with how much I loved myself, but nothing was reflecting that. Me keeping them around wasn't reflecting that, because anytime I was in their presence, it was only because they needed something from me. I never needed. Anytime I gave, I was giving from my partial wholeness. They never gave back. And I had to really understand that this was the dynamic that I was choosing to live under. So now when you choose, I no longer want this, I'm going to trade all of this in. You're saying I don't know what cards I'm going to get. I could get a whole new hand and it'd be a dud too. A whole new hand. Or you could give me a whole new hand, and if I don't like that hand, I could choose not to play anymore and figure it out and play it by ear until I collect enough cards to feel like this hand is sufficient. And that was exactly how I viewed things. I'm very content with the fact that I had to make this choice, because out of that aloneness came me rebuilding my self-worth, me understanding who I truly was. Why were people so adamant about wanting to use me for what I could provide, be it emotionally, mentally, physically? Why? And it was because I did have value that they did not want to admit to. And that was something that was an eye-opener. Then it was learning what brought me peace and realizing that it wasn't tied to any of the things that everyone around me was saying I should desire for myself and for life in general. None of that stuff mattered to me. It never did. So why was I playing by rules that didn't even adhere to me, or a game that I never wanted to win? Then it was when it came to love, understanding that I didn't have a list of what I wanted anymore. There were things I would put on this list, and it was, again, based on what everyone else was saying you're supposed to desire, you're supposed to want for yourself. Based on all of that, I realized that I didn't have a list of what I wanted. I had someone help me define a list of everything I didn't want. So I knew that if any of those things I didn't want approached me, it wasn't for me. They were approaching me because of what they wanted from me. So, that aha moment was amazing. Now, being alone, but never lonely, is a strength. It is a superpower. Because in that aloneness, you find wholeness, you find oneness, you find God. Because remember, you're alone. There's no people around you. But what is around you is your God, guiding you through everything, because you're making choices now that finally identify with who you are to your soul. So he can speak with you. He can show you what you actually are looking for. You can start living the life he designed for you to have, versus you coasting and hoping everything comes together at some point. In that aloneness, I found me. I was finally able to hear the voice that was inside, that was showing me where to go. The internal map. I was able to find that little girl that had to hide who she was every second of every day. She couldn't live in her truth. She had to become something different for the sake of everyone else's comfort. She was finally free. I was finally free. So I had to make this video for any and everyone who found themselves in a position of being alone. Because you are a go-getter. You went to get your autonomy. You went to get your authenticity. You went to go get your life back. And many will live a lifetime and never know what it's like to be able to be whole. Many will think they do. They'll think that having the car, having the marriage, having the house, spending certain amounts of money is what is bringing them wholeness. But if you stripped all of it down, are you still whole? In aloneness, being alone is the only way for you to be able to have everything stripped from you and you still be you unapologetically and happily. So, to the person whose energy I happen to tap into, who thought, no one must want to be around me, and that's the reason why I'm alone. No. The reason I'm alone is because I'd rather be with me and only me than to be around anyone who can't see me for what I'm really worth. Now, if you would like a free coaching call, feel free to tap in that good old QR code that I put up on the page. I think it might even be just the link. Yeah, it's going to be the link. I'll probably put it in the pinned comment too. But yeah, schedule a free consultation call. We can go over all the topics that you see listed right here on the screen. And yeah, let's help you find your autonomy as well. Until next one, thank you for being present. Not for me, not for my cool story, but thank you for being present for you. Because when you show up for you, you ignite your transformation. And that's exactly what we all need. A transformation to take us to amazing places and spaces. And it is through sharing, it is through understanding who you are and who you're becoming that you are able to tap into that and become your truest self. Until next time, love and light, y'all, and peace.